I'm here with Brenna Simmons-St from the Alliance for Collective Action in Denver. Welcome, Brenna.
Well, thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Tell us just a little bit about yourself and the Alliance for Collective Action.
Wonderful. Well, I'm a Colorado native, raised in Telluride and spent some time on Oahu. And through that really found my love of nature and community. Spent over a decade in CSR and corporate social responsibility and hospitality, and then about a decade in nonprofit leadership. And I'm the CEO of a nonprofit based in Denver called the Alliance for Collective Action.
Which is?
So the Alliance is really a convening entity. So we focus on uniting the collective power of environmental and social movements to advance solutions for a thriving planet. And we have two main program areas. The first we call the Center, which is a 40,000 square foot commercial office space located in Denver, Colorado. And through the Center, we support about 160 other nonprofits every year through a model of collective action to help them do their work better and faster and with more collective impact than any one organization could have alone. And then we have a coalition called the Coalition for a Regenerative Future, which really launched in Colorado in 2020, but is scaling nationally this year. And so we're working with folks all across the nation. And the coalition really works on crowdsourcing solutions from communities, so deep community listening to elevate some of the largest challenges communities facing, and then elevate solutions directly from community and help community lead in implementing those solutions. So we have four main program areas focused on the advancement of clean energy, regenerative agriculture and food systems, workforce, really in relation to energy and agriculture, and then policy and advocacy.
I was going to get to regenerative agriculture, but first just give me your take on regenerative and why regenerative seems to be having a moment now, and how is it different than organic or sustainable or some of the other words, or CSR in the sense that
Yeah, I think that's a really important question to ask. I see sustainability and regeneration working together in a dance. And there are some regenerative practitioners that will tell you regeneration is 3 steps ahead of sustainability. And that was my belief for about 10 years while I was studying regenerative practices. And within the last few years, through this work of deep community listening, what we've really come to find is that we don't think regeneration is better than sustainability. We see regeneration and sustainability working in balance. So the pure definition of sustainability is where your inputs meet your outputs. There's balance. And you can sustain anything for a certain amount of time, including the broken, exploitive, extractive systems that govern and shape all aspects of humanity in the modern day. And I believe that we're starting to see signs of collapse because we're fighting so hard to sustain broken systems where we need way more inputs to keep the system going, and it's out of balance. So we think that if we can actually start to regenerate or heal, to me regeneration is synonymous with healing, many different aspects of our life and reinvent systems that govern and shape humanity built on regenerative building blocks, healing building blocks, and then sustain those systems, we will have a much different thriving future.
You mentioned also the other word that seems to come up is systems, and you mentioned food systems. So it's not just having a little local food here, you want to change the whole food system.
Correct. Yeah, I think we need to reinvent basically every system that shapes and governs society and humanity and very fast. And food, I think, is absolutely one of the most fundamental ones. If you really study the arc of evolution for humanity and look at when was the first time humans saw themselves as separate from nature, because I also believe we are animals and we are one with nature, but we have groomed ourselves and fooled ourselves over generations to believe that we are different and better and above nature. And if you really study the arc of society, the first time that split happened was in the first agricultural revolution about 10,000 years ago. There was a big dip in temperature and humans went from hunters and gatherers to more sedentary. And when that happened, we started to other ourselves from nature, having to protect from the elements, protect from other tribes that weren't in our locales. And then if you look at all the different evolutions around from there, the scientific revolution, the religious revolution, the industrial revolution, we're living in the technological revolution now, they all provided great advancements for humanity, but they all further drove the wedge of separation. I think that we are in the age of regeneration coming next. And that is an age of connectedness, of healing, and looking at whole systems. And if food systems were what got us there 10,000 years ago, I think food systems are what can bring us back to connectedness with each other and with nature.
And so just go one step further. We've been asking, is this regenerative agriculture, regenerative food systems, or transformed food systems, is it a model that is a sort of way to feed the planet, or is it a kind of sidelight, nice to have, local, foodie kind of affectation?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you ask. I would say right now it is a budding solution that needs support to scale and grow to create truly global systems that are highly prioritized place-based, nuanced by place, led by community in place, but connected with the global network. And I think if you ask anybody in big ag right now, they'll tell you, oh, that's just a cute hobby farm. There's no way it's going to feed the world. Well, I think if you juxtapose it as well with the energy transition, there's no way we're going to power the world with centralized grid systems. And so I think that we need to actually look at decentralizing a lot of our systems that have become monopolies, food and energy being two major ones. And I do feel like we can feed the world with regenerative agriculture. It's going to take time to get there, but eventually there are higher crop yields, there's better nutrient density, and there's a lot better sense of community and strength of community in these food systems.
And in fact, much of the food of the world now is grown by smallholder farmers all around the world. It's not grown by big ag in corporate agriculture. And if those farmers can be made more successful, more sustainable, more regenerative, you actually can have this kind of distributed system, I would imagine.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, the key to all of that is soil health, because even if, let's say, we say regenerative ag isn't going to be the solution, which I think it is, and you go all in on mono industrial ag, the topsoil and our growing capacity and the soil's capacity to continue growing crops to feed the world is depleting year over year over year, and it's getting exponentially worse. And so you can look at the different estimates for how many crop cycles we have left, but the truth of the matter is, if we don't prioritize the health of our soil and we continue in industrial mono ag, we will not be able to feed the planet the course we're currently going. So we have to change it. And I do think that regenerative ag and looking at food systems as an ecosystem to heal soil and heal community is a really powerful solution.
You mentioned workforce and skilling, and we were talking the other day about the young people generally leaving the farm, but some of these kind of practices actually are bringing young people back to the farm.
Yeah, I mean, if you study the different generations and what motivates them, there's a huge transfer of wealth right now to millennials, mostly women, mostly younger generation, and there's also a huge transfer of land ownership. And you're right, when we're seeing, there's a lot of, I call it desertification of youth, where there's a lack of, it's not a lack of succession planning, but it's a lack of actually having someone to succeed prior owners, because, you know, the youth are not wanting to go into that line of work. But if you look at what's really motivating millennials right now is a sense of purpose, a sense of community, right? It's not just making money for the big guy. And so I do see, and this is anecdotal, but I do see more of a trend back into regenerative ag, the younger generations, than we do back into mono and industrial ag.
And are you helping train folks or introduce younger folks to regenerative ag techniques?
You know, we are working on it. So as I mentioned, we have 4 main focus areas: clean energy, agriculture, workforce policy. And our workforce is currently focused on the clean energy transition. We're starting to build the partnerships in the ecosystem into regenerative ag. But some of the partners that I brought here with us to the summit, Nick and Marissa from DAR, Drylands Agroecology Research, they have a workforce and apprenticeship training program into regenerative agriculture. And that's one of the models that they're really helping to uplift.
So there'll be a just transition to regenerative ag, just like there'll be a just transition to green energy?
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, if you look at the infrastructure transition needed in both energy and in agriculture, it's going to take a huge workforce to do that. And we need to start preparing not just our youth, but folks in all different levels of their career for this transition.
Tell us about some of the projects you're working on.
So within our agricultural focus, everything we do starts with really deep community listening. And so before we just jump in and say, here's a solution, let's go forth, we want to make sure we're working with creating partnership and community with those most directly impacted by the topic at hand. So with ag, we've really deeply engaged a lot of ag producers, soil experts, water experts in Colorado to deeply listen, you know, what is happening with our farms and ranches, what are they really struggling with? And what we hear time and time again is the resources and the support and the knowledge to transition to regenerative agriculture. Any farmer I've ever talked to loves their land, loves their soil. And if they're able to have less inputs by prioritizing soil health, they want to do that, but there's not enough funding and there's not enough peer-to-peer learning out there to really make that happen. So by listening deeply to community, particularly in agriculture, we found there was a big gap in 3 areas: public awareness and education, funding, and awareness and capacity building for our agricultural producers. So we co-created a project with the Colorado Department of Agriculture and many of our coalition partners to create programs to feed those gaps or to fill those gaps. So we started with farm tours. We do farm tours every single year where we bring about 50 people at a time. We tour numerous different regenerative farms and ranches as demonstration sites. They break bread, they walk the land, they touch the soil, they build community, and they start to create more local purchasers of their product. And then we've started bringing in large procurement managers, restaurateurs, chefs, anybody who has a food and beverage purchasing contract on these tours to connect directly with the producers and starting to help them work out purchasing contracts. And then this year we started bringing in legislative farm tours. So we bring our state legislators and our agriculture committee to the farms to talk directly to the ag producers about what are the policy solutions they need to get passed to do their work well. So a few years ago, we partnered with the legislature and the Colorado Department of Agriculture to pass Bill 1181, which is a soil health bill in Colorado that prioritizes the health of our soil and agricultural practices. The other gap we saw with that is, well, we're prioritizing it, but then how do we fund that transition? So we are partnering now with many different partners on 2 different funds for regenerative agriculture. One is in partnership with the Colorado Department of Ag and our partner Zero Foodprint. And it's a 1% fund for the planet that anybody with the food and beverage retail can join into. It doesn't come off the business's bottom line. The consumer pays 10% more on their food and beverage bill.
1% more.
1% more, thank you. And they can opt out if they don't want it. And then that 1% starts to aggregate into a fund. That fund gets redistributed to farms and ranchers to prioritize the transition to regenerative agricultural practices. So that's called the State Healthy Soil Fund. And then we also partner with the Colorado Department of Agriculture on their STAR, so Save Our Agricultural Resources of Tomorrow, and we are a pass-through funder. So the other thing we've heard from farms and ranches is it's really hard for them to apply for grants, to do the reporting. They don't go for funding because it's cumbersome. They need to be out in the field working the land. So we partner with them as an intermediary. We gather the information, we submit the applications on their behalf, we help them get funded actually through our, it's a reimbursement. So we fund them first, then we apply for reimbursement through CDA and they fund us. And these funds can be stacked. So we're helping farmers and ranchers stack capital. So as they transition to regenerative practices, they're able to have capital along each of those transitions. And then the last thing I'll share with it is creating a community of practice. So once a month, we have a regenerative ag working group with about 100 ag leaders across the state that all come together, share best practices, and connect them to what we call TAPs, technical assistance providers, that help with the capacity building and the skill building and knowledge needed for the transition as well.
And now there's also federal policy kind of support for regenerative ag, I think for maybe the first time.
Yes.
How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the big ones that was just passed was the USDA Climate Smart Commodities funding, and both of the funds I mentioned were recipients of scale funding. So we're partnering with open teams to expand the Healthy Soils Fund all across the nation, and starting with California, Colorado, and parts of the Northwest. And then USDA Climate Smart Commodities also funded the Save Our Agricultural Resources of Tomorrow to scale that model nationally as well. So these are stackable capital models proven in Colorado that have the capacity and the funding to go national.
Well, Brenna Simmons-St.
Yes, good job.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.